again, everybody, and welcome back to Eskimo Brothers Reviews. Today, we have episode 23, Gangs of New York. Raw. Naw. So, for those of you that don't know anything about it, so it is a Martin Scorsese film. It was 2002, I believe. It's loosely based on a book from the 1920s, which was based on real events back in the mid-1800s. So the book pretty much discussed what was going on in that time period, the 1840s to the 1860s, and the different groups of people that lived in the city of New York, and the immigrants and the native people that lived there, and just talked about how the struggle for power and the fight for power for that small area. So the film is more about the life of pretty much like one or two like main characters of that era in that place. It's primarily about the life of a young Irish immigrant who's being played by Leonardo DiCaprio. And it's pretty much based on an event that happened in his life when he was very young, and then it fast forwards 16 years to when he's an adult, and the things he does then, and how he tries to live his life and maneuver his way through this crazy time and place in New York City in the 1860s. And I know Shadow Man here has never seen it before. I had seen it once or twice when I was younger, and so I kind of knew what I was getting into. But what did you think? What do you think you were getting into when I first said that we were going to watch this?
Well, just the title, Gangs of New York, and you said it takes place like in old-timey 1800s.
Yeah.
The first thing that came to my mind was Godfather Part 2. With the flashbacks to the Robert De Niro parts.
Okay, yeah.
Where he's the immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like that. So it wasn't what I was expecting. It was good. It had its problems.
Yes, it did.
I would say it probably wasn't good enough to justify its length.
Yes.
If it was shorter, it would have been better. Although I couldn't tell you what would have been good to cut out.
Yeah, I would say it's the same with me. Overall, I think it was a good film, but there were flaws, and one of the major ones is it's a dialogue-driven film. There's not a whole ton of action. Hello. There's not a whole lot of action and wild stuff going on. It's mostly just small rooms, dialogue between a few different characters, and that with the 2 hours and 43-minute runtime made it kind of drag at times. Now, for me, the things that definitely helped out were the accuracy of the people living in that time, and the different groups and gangs. Like there was the 40 Thieves, the Dead Rabbits, the Daybreak Boys, the Bowery Boys. Those were all real gangs from that time. Each, kind of different, slightly different. The way they dressed, or the types of crimes they committed, or, who they pledged their allegiance to, or whatever. But I thought that accuracy was pretty nice. I also really enjoyed the dress of the characters. They had some pretty sexy, nice tall hats, and beautiful bright plaid suits and outfits, and I thought that was pretty cool. Just to see that.
Yeah, most of the men were either wearing really nice suits, or they look like their clothes stink.
Yes, and speaking of like those looks, it did look like everyone was like dirty and sweaty and oily. Like Daniel Day-Lewis's character, his hair was always wet.
Yep.
It was always down. It looked like he was just always a nice hard day at work.
Every time he took his hat off, I was like, God, put that back on.
Yeah, please. Yeah. And same with Leonardo DiCaprio's character. oftentimes he seemed, just sweaty and oily and dirty, but a lot of times they had really nice outfits and stuff, so it was kind of weird to see that and see how different that was.
So the very first thing I wrote down, what the fuck is going on in the beginning? Now I wrote this down, this is before they step outside.
Yes, it was.
Because I'm told this is New York, and I'm looking like, what the hell is this? This is...
Yeah. The beginning does kind of throw you off, because it takes place kind of like underground in an old, it's looked like an old brewery that turned into like a church.
And then they
eventually
dug a basement and made caves in the bottom.
Yeah, there's like caves and basements.
Really
and
weird.
It is very disarming, I guess, to see at first because you don't know what it is. It's almost reminiscent of if you're a fan of The Lord of the Rings. I feel like it's the orcs preparing for battle down in the mountain in the caves. It just doesn't. It's just all weird. There's a lot of like wood scaffolding and just people like playing with knives and getting weapons ready. So it was very strange in the beginning. And then you get to the actual outdoors and you can see, okay, this is like based on a major city, it appears. Not recently, but it looks kind of like an older, like rundown part of a city. And then I don't even know really what to say after that.
Well, there's a big gang fight, and there's some weird slow motion, and some very strange music.
Terrible.
And all I could think is, like, this is like a bad music video from that era. Like,
it's supposed to be, something to get you like into the film, something that kind of like kickstarts you, like, oh, so there's this action, like this is what's going on. I can kind of understand this. There's these two factions fighting against each other, but the battle scene.
It started all right.
It started
because
okay.
there's fast action and it's chaotic, and then it just shifts into this weird.
Yeah, there's slow motion, and it's more modern music, like
a
weird rock type music, and just the like slow motion of people getting like their legs broken, and like bitten, scratched, stabbed, and it didn't make sense. It did the opposite, I think, of what they were trying to do, because it kind of turned me off to it.
There's a couple odd music choices throughout the whole movie. Sometimes there'd be like people singing like old Irish jigs, and then other times it'd be way more modern stuff.
Yeah.
And it was kind of disjointed. And there's a couple parts where it like flashes back to the intro. I thought that was a little weird. Like fairly early in the movie, it flashes back to the beginning. It's like, we just saw this.
Yeah,
it hasn't been long enough in the movie to flash back to this. This was 10 minutes ago.
Maybe the filmmakers, maybe Martin and the boys, got together and they're like, you know what?
Dirty Martin and the boys.
Yeah, Dirty Martin and the boys were like, you know what? Our audience might be really, really stupid. So they might not understand. We did put 16 years later, but maybe they couldn't figure that out. So we're going to flash back again recently. And that was not a good... I feel like there were times when that would have been beneficial, but it was overused too. It was multiple times it happened. And I was like, all right, like 2 of these times would be perfectly fine, but all these other times it's overkill. It's way too much. So yeah, that's another thing I didn't really like.
Yeah, there was like a character that you clearly oh, that's the guy from the beginning, and then it flashes back and shows him at the beginning, like you wouldn't know. Like he's got a distinct look, and
it looks pretty much the same, maybe a little older. Yeah, it's.
Speaking of that, the 16 years later thing. So later they're celebrating the 16th anniversary of an event, and. There's no snow on the ground, even though there is.
In the initial one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it looks like there's a couple flakes, but it looks like it's like the first snow because it's not snowing before that at all.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like,
not,
what? This doesn't look like the same time of year.
It didn't. No. Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that. Like the scenery and all that I thought was pretty well done. Definitely the best overall part of the film was just like the backgrounds and the time period attire.
Another part that took me out of it a bit was there's a scene where there's a building on fire and they go in to loot the place essentially, and they're kind of running and they're breathing just fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no stinging in their eyes from the smoke. Everything's good, just there's fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somehow there's fire burning with no smoke.
It's yeah, it was stuff like that. There was also there were some protesters and a mob throwing big like bricks and rocks, and then you see them bounce after, and it's like, oh, that's blatant styrofoam. Come on, you couldn't have done any better editing or anything else to kind of fix that up. But so there are plenty of problems with this film, whether it be the length, the inaccuracies with accents and stuff, and just overall weird music choices and stuff. So there's plenty. But overall, it's still still say it's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, at least see it once, give it a shot, because there's plenty. I mean, there's those bad parts, but there's plenty of good parts too. If you like female nudity from the waist up, there's some of that about halfway through. There are some like nice like kind of action-packed parts where you're like, oh, what's gonna happen next? Like, is this? Oh no, this. Okay, wow. So there's stuff that is like that. The dialogue, I felt in general was pretty well written between characters. I like that. And of course you have great actors like John C. Reilly, of course, and Cameron Diaz. No, like Daniel Day-Lewis and Leonardo DiCaprio do carry it very well. So yeah, there's plenty of good parts to go with the bad. Did you have anything else to add to this?
Yeah, two things. One, there's a scene with a male and female showing their scars.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the female scar looked fine, but then you see the males, and they just look like they're glued on, like from the corner store joke shop.
Yeah.
They just look the fakest scars I've ever seen in a movie.
They did try to hide that with like candlelight.
Yeah,
and
it was
stuff
low lighting.
In the dark.
It was nighttime.
So you couldn't really tell, but yeah, that was. I didn't think of that at first, but now that I think back about it, yeah, it's definitely accurate.
And the other thing is, so there's at some point there's a sheriff who gets killed, murdered, like in the doorway, and his killer is like speaking into the doorway, but you never see who he's talking to. Like, I didn't get who he's supposed to be speaking to, because he wasn't talking loud enough for like the people
other
outside.
people around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't catch that.
It's like, well, who is he? Like, I thought for sure the camera was gonna show someone sitting inside the building.
Yeah.
But they never do.
Maybe it was cut for time. They cut out that, but they don't
They
cut out the
that.
other stuff. Yeah.
I was just like, well, what the hell is this?
Yeah. So, I'd say the last thing I'm going to add about it is there's a good political aspect to it. 'Cause it does take place in New York City, 1800s, and I don't specifically recall a lot, but I heard a lot about Mr. Tweed and Tammany Hall and corruption and things of that sort, and they kind of showed all of that in this film here. They showed off the different like corruption between political officials, police officers, the gangs, just normal people on the street, just how everything was corrupt in New York City.
It was all
apparently.
intertwined.
Yeah, and it just it showed how, their belief or their opinion, how politics was ran back then, with a lot of buying of votes and doing whatever you can to just get the votes for your candidate, and it seemed very unprofessional and immoral and dirty, but that seemed to be a sign of the times. Multiple times you'll see Mr. Tweed just down at the docks looking for the new Irish immigrants to come in, and he repeatedly says in different styles and different ways about how, this is just more votes for me, like the more I can get in, blah, 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 and that's all he cares. He doesn't care about the human beings, he doesn't care about the people, he just cares about the votes.
Yeah.
So that was, a shocking thing. I mean, maybe not shocking to us, but, not to me at least, but it would be to other people to see stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool about it. So yeah, the historical aspect part, I really enjoyed that. And I just liked, historical scenery, the outfits, the dialogue was all pretty good to me. I enjoyed it. There's nothing else to add.
No. Just what movie's next?
That will be so episode 24 will be the World War I film 1917. It's a 2019 film. It's a lot of war films, especially World War I and II. A lot of people might say they're pretty similar, but this is a different style. This next one is filmed in a different style. It's a little different. It's definitely one of my top 3 war films of all time. So
That's bold.
top 3, yeah. So
I can't wait to rip this apart then.
he will try and he will fail. So please, thank you for joining us this time. Please join us next time for 1917. Goodbye.